Hello and welcome to UFC Fight Night. I am your host, Dave Milhouse. With me is Cody Saftik. Today we're going all the way over to Las Vegas, Nevada at the UFC Apex for UFC Vegas 24. 24 of these have gone by already. It feels like just yesterday it was 1 and 2 and 3. The UFC has been putting out card after card, hardly missing a week. And they've done it again here. Another free event for you to watch. 12 fights on the docket. But before we get to any of that, we're going to go to the main event of the weekend. Jake Paul, Ben Askren in a boxing ring. Obviously the highest level of striking known to man. Cody, welcome to the show. How are you doing?
Hey, pumped up, man. As you mentioned, we've got a UFC this weekend. We got a Bellator on tomorrow night. And then perhaps the people's main event of the entire weekend. Ben Askren in a pro boxing match. Something I don't think any of us ever thought that we'd ever see. But here it is coming to fruition. And as you and I are about to jump into, does he have a chance? Is he a live underdog in this spot? Pretty crazy to think.
Well, considering he's fighting someone with a 2-0 pro boxing record, you would think no. But when you go back and take a look at who these fights are against, I think you have to think yes, because there's nothing professional about either of the fights that Jake Paul has had. So it is a very interesting situation with very limited data and footage. All in all, though, it will be fun to break down. So let's get right into that one first. Do you want to take the reins, or should I kick this off?
Yeah, so basically, I mean, we know what we're getting. We got a YouTube star in Jake Paul, someone who he's not a really fighter, but he transcends the sport now, and that he brings an entire different demographic into it. Listen, if you're Dana White, you're any president of any major promotion, the thing you're trying to build is stars. You're trying to build a star. It's very difficult to build a star just from fighting, because at some point you're going to lose. And when you lose, people just, they don't give you that star power anymore. They don't give you that, the credit that you deserve. You see it all the time in boxing, where a guy would be like 28-2, and it's like, boom, he lost twice. It's like, he's 28-2. Are you kidding me? It's an incredible record. It just doesn't fly in the world of pro boxing. In MMA, it's even more difficult. You can never accrue a record like that. So at some point, you're going to lose. And when you lose, people all of a sudden believe that you suck. What Jake Paul is able to go do is he went and became a star on YouTube. He's got, my cousin Emily messaged me out of the blue before his last fight, Nate Robinson. She's like, you watching the fight tonight? I'm like, yeah, tons of fights tonight. Or you watch it, and I'm like, you watching Tyson versus Jones, right? Is that what you're talking about? She's like, no, Tyson versus Jones. No one cares about that. We're looking at Jake Paul versus Nate Robinson. Didn't even know who Nate Robinson was. She didn't. But they're watching Jake Paul. This is taking an entire different demographic and bringing it over to combat sports. So as much as people can say it's a black eye for combat sports, it's a black eye for boxing, it's a black eye for MMA, all these different things, it's really not. It's taking a different viewer, someone who's never going to watch a fight, brings them over. And if 1% of the audience thought to themselves, you know what, this is pretty cool, I'd watch this again, then maybe that 1% translates into viewership for one of the major promotions down the road. So I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing, but what we do have is we have someone who's only in this spot, in Jake Paul, because he's a star. Now, if you're the star, you're the A side. And if you're the A side, you get to pick who you want to fight. And so you want to fight a UFC veteran. It'd be real cool to tell my buddies I beat up a UFC veteran, right? Okay, well, I can't fight a UFC fighter in an MMA fight, so I'm going to box one. I'm going to take one, I'm going to box him, take him out of his element. If you had to write a list of the worst strikers in UFC, I wouldn't say history because it's going back to 93, but let's say of the modern era, let's say even of the last 5 or 10 years, Ben Askren's name would routinely come at the top of the board. I mean, this is a guy that absolutely got pieced up by Damian Maia in a striking match. He's also been retired for a couple of years. And Ben Askren was a guy that was never ripped up in shape. He never came on the scales and it was like, oh man, look at that six-pack. Look, Ben Askren's been taking this fight extra seriously. He always does train hard. He always does take the fight seriously. But he's a guy that would kind of balloon up in between fights. He kind of has a pudgy build to him. So taking the same man, having him retired for a couple of years, one would have to assume he's not in great shape. One would have to assume if he was working on any of his skills, boxing certainly wasn't it. And he has a name. He has a name because he's a former Bellator champ. He fought in the UFC. And he's got that viral knockout loss to George Masvidal. But George Masvidal became a star after that, right? It's like it went viral. Everybody watched it. Everybody remembers the flying knee. So you see Jake Paul, he'll bring on Jorge Masvidal to talk a little trash to Ben Askren. He's playing off that, right? So he wants to go out there, beat the same guy who has that name, who people saw from the viral video, and look good. The problem is handpicking an opponent doesn't always work out. You can talk to Carlos Ulbrich. We watched a couple of weeks ago. Ulbrich, he took on Kenny Njoku. It was a handpicked opponent. He had 10 guys he could have picked from. He specifically picked Kenny Njoku. Apollo Creed, he specifically picked Rocky Balboa out of a book just because of the name, the Italian Stallion, sounded pretty good. handpicking an opponent sometimes blows up in your face. And even though he took the worst guy he possibly could in terms of a boxer in Ben Askren, I personally see that this one could blow up in his face. As far as boxing skill goes, yeah, he looks like he's a little more refined. He's a little bit longer. He's a little bit bigger. Maybe he packs a little bit of a better punch. With Ben Askren, when he's not joking around and he's throwing his combinations, you see he's still stiff. He's still rigid. He's not very comfortable in that boxing element. But he's tough. He's a fighter. He's been punched in the face many of times. He's been busted up. He's gone through the fire. He's gone through all this. He's a world-class athlete. And I just feel like this is a boxing match, sure, but he's going to be able to take those punches and move forward. The one thing you notice about Nate Robinson is every time a single punch hit him, he just would drop to the ground, get up, massively flustered, doesn't know what he's supposed to be doing, and then has to go back in there. Ben Askren's not going to have that problem. Ben Askren's been in there. He's trained at a world-class level. He's been at Rufus Sport for almost a decade. He's been through the motions. He's been through the grind. He's experienced all that. So hitting this guy, he's not going to go away. But beyond all that, the real key here I don't think anybody's talking about is the clinch. I know you can't really fight out of the clinch in boxing, not as much as you could in bare knuckle boxing, where they'll allow you to fight out of it, but you see it all the time. Bernard Hopkins was an absolute master of it. You would go to load up on 1 or 2 shots, and he would just clinch you up, hit you twice on the break, come back out. You would go to load up on a couple shots, he'd clinch you back up. He can just wear on Jake Paul. He can just wear on him, throw off his timing, throw off his rhythm, dirty box him, so to speak, land those little clinch shots, land those little dirty uppercuts, work the body, press this guy up. He's also a lot stronger in that he's, wrestled at the Olympics, this guy. You can back him up, hopefully get him into a corner, don't allow him much space to move, and if he can't move, and there isn't a whole lot of distance, then work him over. I would have to say you'd have to go with the pro fighter, but I see a lot of love coming on Jake Paul, and I think that's why you have to take Ben Askren. He's got such a big fan base. He's got so many people that are just like, oh, what? You say he's going to knock him out? Guess he's going to knock him out. It's like, nah. Guys make predictions all the time. But again, the people that are watching him fight are not fight fans. So they haven't grasped what's about to happen. And I would say Ben Askren's got something up his sleeve. So I got Askren. I would take the over as well. Like Jake Paul's, his pride will get in the way. Like he's not going to quit, certainly, and he's not going to go down without a fight. And then Ben Askren, like he's a UFC veteran. He's a guy with 20 pro fights. He's been there. He's done that. He's traveled all over the world to compete extensively. Like I don't think he's just going to flop over the first time a boxing glove hits him. And the last thing you got to factor in is that Ben Askren generally gets hit by 4-ounce gloves, an MMA glove, right? 4-ounce glove is going to generate a ton more power than a boxing glove, essentially a mitt. So I think he's going to be okay. I've seen this thing is going to bank some rounds, probably hit that over, and I'm going to go with Ben Askren.
I'm forced to agree with you on a lot of that. A couple things I'll point out. You mentioned Ben getting ready for training here, not always coming in great shape. From an interview I just watched with Ben, he had mentioned, during his career when he was like a welterweight beast, he would walk around at more like 183, 184 kind of thing. And so he's only cutting about 13, 14 pounds. He just had hip surgery, so he was on the shelf for quite a while, literally couldn't do anything for months. And now he said he's in the mid 190s and he's going to fight at 190. So as far as coming into this in great shape, he certainly is not, it sounds like, nor has he been, mobile for several months leading up to this. However, Ben Askren has been hit by many a good punchers and taken some of the worst damage you've ever seen. If you take someone's UFC career, my God, has Ben taken some beatings. So I would imagine that when you get in the ring with someone like Jake Paul, it's more like sparring than it is, what he went through with Robbie Lawler and George Masvidal. And, countless others, much better strikers. I mean, other than Damian Maia, I would say Jake Paul's got to be the worst striker he'll ever fight in his life. But looking at this from a value perspective, I mean, I can't believe what's sitting out here for lines. For one, I think the odds makers made a big mistake here on the Jake Paul line. He's a minus 200 favorite. They got him about minus 125 to 140 range to win this by knockout. And plus 650, plus 700 to win by decision. Give me a break here. I honestly think that should be cut in half. He's equally as likely, I think, to win this by decision as he is by knockout. And if not, even maybe more likely to win this by decision than he is by knockout. So right away, I'm seeing Jake Paul by decision plus 700. I think there's good value there, actually. He's going to have to outland Ben in just over half the rounds, 8-round fight. Can he do that before he gets tired and wears out? Certainly possible. Second thing that stood out to me, you can get over 2.5 rounds at minus 250. Ben Askren isn't knocking anyone out with boxing gloves in the first 3 rounds, and I find it very hard to believe that he's going to lose to someone of the skill level of Jake Paul in the first 3 rounds. So at minus 250, I'm probably going to make that one of my largest plays of the weekend. I think this easily gets into like round 4, 5, 6, easily. But really, where the advantage lies here, like you mentioned, is in the clinch. Now, I'm not so sure that nobody's really thinking of this, but I don't think they understand how much of a boxing match can be in the clinch. Ben is very strong. Obviously, one of the best grapplers in UFC history, or just in combat sports history. He doesn't have his fingers, but he's still going to be able to grab you. He's still going to be able to hold you. It's going to wear you out. It's going to frustrate you. And a guy like Jake Paul here, kind of a little bit messed up in the head, probably going to get frustrated, probably going to start swinging harder after that. And that's going to lead to himself being tired, right? I mean, Ben's finally got some big gloves to put in front of his face when this kid's loading up. It's not like he's never seen a punch coming before. He's got okay head movement. Now he's got big gloves to cover his face, and then he can clinch, dirty box his way out, and continue. So I'm looking at this like, yes, I think Ben is live to win this fight. You can get him in like the plus 160 range. I think that's fair. He's going to win this at least half the time. He's a professional fighter fighting a kid from YouTube. And that's just the way I view this. I don't care if he's not a good boxer. At the end of the day, neither is Jake Paul. So this is just a fight with boxing gloves, really, kind of. So I would actually favor Ben in this situation. And furthermore, you can get him like round 6, 7, 8 by knockout at like huge odds. I'm seeing like plus 2,200 in round 7. We haven't seen Jake Paul get that far. We don't know how he's going to hold up cardio-wise. We don't know how he's going to, deal with these clinches and getting chin checked and all the rest. I think there's a really good chance that he gets worn out in this one and starts to look pretty sloppy late. So there is value all over the place here. I think I'm interested in taking a little Ben Askren at plus 160. I'm definitely interested in the over 2.5 rounds at minus 250. And I'm actually kind of interested in Jake Paul plus 700 by decision, because ultimately I think this is most likely to go to decision. So I can't wrap my head around those odds at all. Kind of blows my mind. But yeah, weird fight, limited data. I'm not saying go ham on these.
I know you're a stock man.
Yep.
Yeah, I know you're a stock man. So when you look at it, like, what's our safe angle here? The safe angle, I believe, and I completely agree with you, is the over 2.5 rounds. I think whoever wins this fight is going to win this after 2.5 rounds. That's what the angle we're going for. Ben Askren at dog money, it's like, man, it's too hard to pass away. That's our mid range. If you want to talk penny stocks, though, you're talking about Ben Askren late finish. What I actually didn't mind was the draw, right? The draw is plus 1,500. It's 15 to 1 on a draw. And the reason why I don't mind that is, in MMA, you've got 3 rounds or 5 rounds. So a draw would have to consist of either a 10-8 round or a point deduction. And you don't see a whole lot of point deductions. And you don't really see a whole lot of 10-8 rounds that one guy got a 10-8 and the other guy won the other 2 rounds, right? So draws just don't happen very often. But boxing, you've got a 4-round fight, a 6-round fight, an 8-round fight, a 10-round fight, or a 12-round fight. So splitting up half the rounds for both guys, that happens all the time. Could happen all the time. Now, you look at the last time that this company Thriller put on a pay-per-view, and they've got Mike Tyson taking on Roy Jones Jr. Mike Tyson effectively wins every single round. Yet the fight was still ruled a draw because it's more of an exhibition. It's more of a showcase. And so when you look at this fight, the A side's obviously Jake Paul. If Jake Paul's in these close rounds, you got to think that they're going to favor Jake Paul. You got to think that they're not looking to give the poster, but not looking to give, the selling point, the feature. They're not looking to give him a loss. At best, if he loses this fight, but it's close, he would get the draw. But then banking on your narrative, Jake Paul comes out here the first 4 rounds, and he is faster, and he's a little quicker, and he is feeling good, and he lands those, and he wins those early rounds. But Ben Askren takes over late, and starts to grind him, and starts to beat him up, and takes the later rounds of the fight. This thing's going to be close. If this thing is close, they rule it a draw so that they can run it back. Hey, the money's in the rematch. You think that this is going to sell good? You should see a Jake Paul versus Ben Askren 2 after a competitive 8-round fight. So for 15 to 1, that's our penny stock, baby. It's just a small little punt play, but I would say that a draw is not completely out of the question here.
No, not at all. Not at all. And yeah, just like you just mentioned, the way the judges might skew the decision, I don't know how you can not take a little stab at this plus 700 on the favorite to not knock out one of the toughest guys he'll ever fight ever. even if he continues boxing. Ben Askren is tough. Man, he is tough. So, like, what are you
Yep.
really going to put this guy away when he can cover his face with 2 huge gloves? I just don't see it. So give me Jake Paul plus 700 and give me the over 2.5 for like back the truck up into that one. That's my favorite play of the weekend. Second favorite. We'll get to my favorite last on the show. But let's get this over to UFC. UFC Vegas 24. We're back in the small octagon where things get a little bit weird, especially for the strikers who like to stay on the outside and move around. We don't have a whole lot of that on the card. So, this might not be too big of a deal. But here we have Robert Whittaker, Kelvin Gastelum. It's an interesting fight. It's an interesting line. I personally don't see any value on the Whittaker side, even though he's my pick to win. Gastelum is always someone who I've thought is a little bit overrated. And since his Israel Adesanya fight has looked that way, it's almost looked like, yeah, I was right. He is a little bit overrated. He's been kind of shitty since. And that should have been something that I noticed in Israel Adesanya's last fight as a great reason to take the dog, because if Gastelum can give him that much work, why wouldn't the lightweight or light heavyweight champion of the world be able to give him that much work? That's my bad, kind of going against one of my reads. But here I still have trouble with Robert Whittaker at the minus 250 range. Yeah, he's the better boxer, but Gastelum's kind of got some weird style that can give you problems in close. Is Whittaker's chin as solid as we hope it is? That's another thing I'm not so sure about. So in this fight, I don't see any value at all, which is kind of sad. The main event everyone wants to hear about. But luckily, we have different sets of eyes, and maybe Cody has a little bit of a different vantage point for us. Do you have a side you like in this main event?
Yeah, so I'm going to agree with you. I've got Robert Whittaker. I just have trouble, paying up to this price. I mean, Robert Whittaker's a guy that you look at those fights at Yoel Romero, you look at the fights at Israel Adesanya, you look at even going back to the Wonderboy Thompson fight once upon a time. Like, he has taken a lot of damage. You do kind of see him in his fights now. Maybe he's slowing down ever so slightly. The injury's also piling up. Knee injury. He had a bad staph infection that almost killed him, apparently. Like, one's got to wonder if he's still that prime version. He's still young enough, but, he got some wear and tear. I thought he looked a lot better against Jared Cannonier, but again, 3-round situation, maybe slow down the pace a little bit, fight from the outside. It's all well and good. The line's just too big. Kelvin Gastelum is cast iron, man. Submitting him is going to be very, very difficult. I know Jack Hermanson did it, but I do not see Robert Whittaker doing it. In fact, Robert Whittaker never uses his wrestling offensively almost ever, so he's not going to try to take Kelvin Gastelum down. We should be able to get a striker versus striker battle here. And knocking Kelvin Gastelum out, also, again, good luck. He's got a very, very good chin. You did see when he fought Israel Adesanya, as you mentioned, in that 5th round, he got dropped like 4 times and not knocked out. He perseveres every time. He gets up every time. He's very difficult to put away. So the angle that I'm looking at here is at the over 3.5 rounds. I think if this is a 3-round fight, it goes to decision 100%. We got a 5-round fight to deal with. And the interesting thing here is fight goes the distance is minus 130. Over 3.5 is minus 155. So 7.5 minutes less to deal with, and the price is really not that far off. I think that the way we see this one goes, Kelvin Gastelum probably tries to take Whittaker down a little bit, but ultimately probably doesn't take him down, and that would just slow down the action a little bit. Striker versus striker, Whittaker's the better guy. He's the rangier guy, stay to the outside, use the jab, use the kicks, set Kelvin Gastelum up a little bit. Kelvin Gastelum's output, as far as if you look at the Adesanya fight, that's the outlier, but beyond that, he doesn't throw a ton, and there's no denying. I know we're on the same page here. He's not really a middleweight. The guy is a natural welterweight. He's always struggled making 170 pounds, so he campaigns at 185, but being, he calls himself 5'9", and I would almost disagree with that. But he's just not a very large frame guy. And whenever he takes on these top 5, top 10 opponents, he's out of his element. He's coming up short against them. Whenever he's taking on Michael Bisping, 40 years old with one eye, Jacare Souza, 39 years old, certainly seen his better days, Vitor Belfort, 41 years old, not allowed to use TRT anymore. Like, he shines against elder statesmen who are on their way out. He can still beat an Ian Heinisch who's not even ranked in the top 15. Like, he can still hang with that level, no problem. It's beyond that, taking on those top 5, top 10 guys. He just can't quite seem to get over the hump. Again, Adesanya fight, it's 2-2 going into the 5th. He seriously wobbles Israel Adesanya with a head kick. That's crazy. But I really think he left it all in the cage that night. I really think that 5th round took something out of him, and he really hasn't been the same. He doesn't have that same willingness to engage. You saw in the subsequent fight against Darren Till, he was very gun-shy. He did not want to press the action. I think a similar fight plays out here. But because the value's not quite there on Whittaker, I'm going to go with that over 3.5 rounds. If I had to pick straight up one side of this, I am taking Robert Whittaker, and I would take Robert Whittaker by decision. But as far as the play I like the most is the over 3.5 at minus 155.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think the best, if you have to play this, if you have to, it's the over. If you're looking for a little bit of a parlay, maybe a little fun action, why not some Robert Whitaker with the over 2.5 in Ben Askren's fight? That'll get you around a -110. It's interesting. I'm probably not doing it. I'm just saying, for people that are action junkies, yeah, Robert Whitaker's the pick to win. But yeah, it's not as big of a gap as the odds would suggest here. So completely with you there. Whitaker wins a close fight, probably by decision. Next up, not a typically good co-main event. Drakkar Klose, Jeremy Stephens. I think it'll be a sneaky good fight, but I mean, now we're not really at a high level anymore here, and that's kind of disappointing to see. Well, maybe it won't be disappointing to see. As long as it's entertaining, it'll be fine. This is an interesting fight. I have a lot of trouble capping this one too. It's going to come down to volume, and I don't really feel like either guy has great volume. They're both landing just over 3 strikes a minute. Drakkar Klose is 3.89. That's a little better. Klose has much better accuracy, a 53% striking accuracy to Jeremy Stephens' 40%. So, I mean, Drakkar might be slightly better striker, but at the end of the day, I don't really think he's that good of a striker. Wrestling, not that good for either guy. Takedown defense, not that great for either guy. Probably won't come into play. Calf kicks from Klose. Also, Stephens, pretty decent in that area. It feels like a really close fight. It's lined like it's a close fight. What can I even really say? I want to say Drakkar Klose because he's a little bit bigger. He's got a little bit better accuracy, but that also comes with fighting a different strength of schedule. And although it's not a bunch of slouches by any means, you would have to agree that Jeremy Stephens has fought the better competition. And when you're fighting Cater, Rodriguez, Zabit, Aldo, these guys in your last 5, that makes it kind of difficult to put up good numbers and look good. So when you come down here or go up a weight class here, your weight cut doesn't really exist as much, and you fight a guy who's a far lesser striker than any of the people I just mentioned, maybe that will let you get comfortable. And when you get comfortable, you get in a flow. And when you get in a flow, you start to look good. This one's another crapshoot. I want nothing to do with it. Do you want something to do with this fight? Take me through it.
Yeah, not overly like I want anything to do with the fight, but what's interesting is that Jeremy Stephens is coming back up to 155 pounds. Now, this is a guy that started off his UFC career at 155, had some great moments at 55, but was undersized. And, him and Drakkar Klose are both 5'9". In fact, Stephens is a 71-inch reach versus a 70-inch reach for Klose. But that's not everything. Like, Klose is naturally the thicker man. He's naturally a bigger guy. Like, I don't think height aside, he's just like a lot more filled out. I don't think he'd be able to go down to 145, but Jeremy Stephens did. Now, interesting of note that this is huge for me. Once upon a time, back in 2012, I had Yves Edwards over Jeremy Stephens, and it was the first time Jeremy Stephens ever got knocked out. That I didn't bet. I just had Yves Edwards straight up as an underdog selection, but he knocked Jeremy Stephens out. And I remember being shocked, like, wow, old man Yves had one left in the tank, and also, who knocks out Jeremy Stephens? Like, quite a feat. But that was his last time fighting at 155. He realized after that, you know what? I'm not as big enough to be fighting these 55ers. I'm going to go down to 45. And had huge moments, as you mentioned. The guys fought Cub Swanson. He fought Charles Oliveira. He fought Max Holloway, Frankie Edgar, Hanato Moicano, Gilbert Melendez, Duho Choi, Josh Emmett, Jose Aldo, Magomed Sharipov, Yair Rodriguez, Calvin. Dude, the best guys in the world at 145 pounds. So him coming back up to 155, he's 34 years old. He's lost his last 4. He's winless in his last 5. It's a bad stretch for him. And it's almost like Sam Alvey last weekend. It's like you're getting a little bit older. You're searching for something different. You're trying a new weight class. But it's like facts are facts. And the fact was for Sam Alvey that he had also lost 4 in a row and was winless in his last 5. Stephens is in a similar position. So he's looking for something different. I agree the UFC's done him no favors. They should just give him an easier 45er. But he's finally coming back up to 55. And I think that's what's going to help out for Klose, is that Klose in the clinch should be a little bit stronger. He should be able to control Stephens a little bit. Klose likes to do that. He's got high ring IQ, Not high ring IQ in his last fight against Beneil Dariush, where he has Beneil absolutely rocked and out of there. And he gets a little too overzealous, a little too over-aggressive. He chases that kill, and as a result, he gets knocked out by Beneil Dariush. But imagine he did it. Imagine he took his time, set that up, and knocked out Beneil. This dude would be in title contention. This dude would be being talked about as one of the top lightweights in the sport. Unfortunately, hell of a fight, hell of a finish. He gets caught by Beneil. But he's taken 13 months off since. Shake the cobwebs off. First time he's ever been knocked out. So Jeremy's going to have to rely on the knockout, as he usually does. Even when you look at Jeremy's last 2 wins, which is Josh Emmett, Duho Choi, back in 2018, 3 years ago now, he loses the first round in those fights, comes back and catches him in the second. He's going to rely on have to catching Drakkar Klose, but again, being at 55, his power is not going to be the same. Klose is going to be able to take that punch a little bit better. I think Klose is going to fight a better game plan, a smarter game plan, and it should allow him to prevail ever so closely. But I honestly think that the play here, I don't want a ton invested on Drakkar Klose straight up. I think the play here is you take this fight goes the distance at minus 130. You could take that over 2.5 as well. It's minus 150. But the reason why I think this thing's going the distance is with Stephens, I mean, he's still very durable himself. Yes, he got knocked out in his last fight against Calvin Kattar. No big deal. He got finished by Jose Aldo. No big deal. And yeah, way back in the day by, at one time the consensus greatest lightweight of all time in Neves Edwards. So again, no big deal. We know how durable this guy is. We know how scrappy he is. And at 155, not having to make a bad weight cut, well, I imagine his chin might be a little bit better. But the real thing here is that Drakkar Klose is a decision machine. All of his wins are by decision. All of his losses are by decision. Sorry, he's got 2 losses, 1 by decision, and then the last one against Beneil, he got caught. But again, you give him a pass because Beneil is such a world-class opponent. So the way these guys match up against each other, it's probably going to be striker versus striker. Klose is going to try to slow him down by wearing on him. Stephens is going to try to use that low calf kick. But hey, I mean, Drakkar Klose is out of the MMA lab with John Crouch. These guys specialize in the low calf kick. Surely he's going to be ready for this. It's going to be a close fight. It's going to be a competitive fight. I can see Stephens winning. But either side of who wins, I still think the fight goes the distance. And so for that reason, I think that my best play here would be fight goes the distance minus 130.
I like that. That is probably the most likely scenario. Personally, I think the line should be flipped. We're seeing like the 115 to 120 range on Stephens. I think that should probably be Drakkar Klose in the minus 115 to 120. So slight value on Klose, I guess. And I think you feel the same way. But yeah, the over sounds just a bit more par for the course. I like that. Third up here, Andre Arlovsky, Chase Sherman. This is one that I should have got on the opener. Chase Sherman got bet way down immediately. But now at the current line, call me crazy. I kind of think there's a little bit of value on Arlovsky. My issue with Arlovsky is his output. It kind of sucks. He's landing 3.48 significant strikes per minute. This guy's had a long career, so that's a lot of sample size. Chase throws way more than that. Chase lands 6 per minute. They land at the same accuracy. Arlovsky gets hit less, but he also lands less. So really, it's not really like a great finisher in Arlovsky, and he's hard to put away. So at the end of the day, I kind of feel like this comes down to just volume, and that would be the Chase Sherman side. So, I hate it. I hate feeling like old man Arlovsky is slightly better, but might just not have the output. So this makes it another very difficult fight for me to handicap. I feel like either guy is live, but it's not often you get Andre Arlovsky as a favorite. I mean, this guy's been a favorite. I think this would be the 3rd time since 2013, maybe 14. It's not something he often gets to do. So, yeah, I'm very interested to see how this one goes. I guess I'll pick Arlovsky, but I'm not comfortable betting this at all. So again, I'm going to have to get you to save me. Is there any value on this fight? Do you see it going a certain way?
Okay, well, you know what? We're actually on the exact same page. So Chase Sherman, this is a short notice replacement, and Andre Arlovsky is taking the fight on like a couple weeks' notice. So he jumps into the spot, and the line is announced, and he's the favorite. Now, Andre Arlovsky, he's been the underdog in 11 straight fights. The last time he was the favorite was against Marcin Tybura. He lost, and it was 2017. 4 years, 11 fights as the underdog. And mind you, he's been winning some fights. He's actually been giving a pretty good account of himself. But at 42 years old, his power has never really been that great, and it's certainly not there anymore. What he does is he goes in there and he has sparring-type rounds with guys. Now, this is honestly what I call the Andre Arlovsky effect, is that when I got into MMA in 2006. My first exposure to it would have been like 2002, and he was the champ. He was the man at the time, right? And all the fighters that are in the division now, everybody that's come before Andre Arlovsky, they know who he is, and you respect him. And when he's fighting Alistair Overeem or Josh Barnett or Stipe, they're kind of all that same generation. They don't care Andre Arlovsky. They're going to go out there and knock him out. But when he takes on these young prospects, these guys give him way too much respect. And you look at the Tanner Boser fight, the Felipe Lins fight, these guys just stare at him like, holy shit, I'm fighting Andrei Arlovski. It's like, man, you gotta, they always say, oh, you gotta get to the point where your idols become your rivals. You gotta go out there and you want to beat these guys. You want to take them off that pedestal. But a lot of the times when guys fight, they give them too much respect. And that Boser fight's a key example where Boser just kind of kicks the lead leg a little bit. Andre just stands there, and then at the end of the round, he throws a three-piece combination. Two of them miss, one of them lands. The judges somehow give it to him. But the numbers, and I know you mentioned this already, numbers are just not there, man. His ask fight against Tom Aspinall, again, he gets choked out in the second round. 20 significant strikes landed over, into the second round. The fight with Tanner Boser, it goes 15 minutes, 3 rounds, 34 significant strikes landed. Part of that, him versus Felipe Lins, 50 significant strikes landed. This is all over the course of 15-minute periods of time. So is his chin great? Yeah, we've seen him get knocked out 10 times in his pro MMA career. But I don't know that Chase Sherman goes out there and knocks out Andrei Arlovski. What I do know is that Chase Sherman likes to throw 2-3 times at. He's a guy that's easily going to come out here, throw 100 significant strikes if he has his way. And again, I know that it's lesser competition, but it's his willingness to get out there and engage with guys, right? It's his willingness to get out there and just let his hands go. You look at his fight with Rashad Coulter is 103. His fight with Damian Grabowski, 111. His fight with Augusto Sakai, 79. And then his last fight with Ike Villanueva, it goes 5 minutes and 49 seconds. He had already landed 51 significant strikes. That's more than Andrei Arlovski typically lands over the course of 15 minutes. So output's there. Now, people are going to say, hey, man, Chase Sherman doesn't move his head, and Chase Sherman doesn't do this, and Chase Sherman doesn't do that. I'll tell you something. Chase Sherman's a great athlete in that he used to be a collegiate football player. He's one of these big, tall, he's 6'4", 78-inch reach, but he's green when he first comes to the UFC. I know what he's getting himself into. He's trained by Alan Belcher, and his top training partner is Jason Knight, a featherweight. Doesn't really know what he's getting himself into just yet. So his first UFC isn't great. He fought middling guys, didn't get a great account of himself. After he was released from the UFC, goes to the regional scene, does good, gains experience, gets a little bit better, makes improvements, and then signs with Bare Knuckle Boxing, BKB, with the BKFC promotion in particular with David Feldman. And that's interesting because he ends up fighting for the title against Joey Beltran, who I know people will laugh because his UFC tenure. Joey Beltran is the Bare Knuckle Boxing heavyweight GOAT. He's the champ. He's the man. You don't want to play with this guy. Chase Sherman goes up 5 hard rounds with him, loses. But to me, I remember thinking, geez, this guy's bare knuckle boxing now and going 5 hard rounds. Now the UFC calls for a second run at the UFC. And Chase Sherman's actually a full-time firefighter as well. The first time he fought in the UFC, he was still a firefighter. This time the UFC calls, Chase Sherman decides, you know what? I got to give this the best go I can. I don't want to wake up one day as an old man with regrets of, I could have made a better account of myself. So he leaves his job. He trains full-time. He shows up in the Ike Villanueva fight, A, in much better shape, and B, looks a lot better, puts it on him. So now you got to think about this spot. He's in great shape. He has a full camp. He's motivated. He's making improvements. He's still only 31 years old, which is very young as a heavyweight. And he's drawing Andrei Arlovski, the 42-year-old replacement, likes to just get into these low-output sparring matches. Isn't this a good spot for Chase Sherman as an auto bet underdog? Yes. But now it seems like people are starting to wake up, and so the line much better earlier in the week. Now it's getting near even. And the crazy thing is, you and I are talking about first time Andrei Arlovski's been favorite in 4 years, 11 fights. He might actually go off as the underdog again come fight time, the way that money's moving in on Sherman. So I guess we'll have to see. Certainly people are going to want to see weigh-ins, but ever so slightly, I got Sherman. Andrei Arlovski, he's got this thing where people talk about the chin. Is the chin gone? Can he still take a punch? Like, he's shown that he can take a shot. Even that last fight with Tom Aspinall had him rocked, but he's able to take the fight. So if Chase Sherman just goes out there with the output, boxes him up from the outside. I know it's tougher with a smaller cage, but uses the reach as long as he can, uses the output. He's got the better cardio in the spot simply because he's had the full camp. Then a Chase Sherman by decision would be plus 365. Again, we're already looking at a decision prop in our first fight. Maybe over 3.5 was a safe play that I like there. We're looking at a decision prop. Do we really want to bet all these decision props? But a plus 365 certainly is a little bit of meat on the bone that we can work with. And with Chase Sherman, yeah, I mean, he can land a plethora of shots. He's more of a volume puncher than a power puncher. I don't know that he knocks out Arlovski, but again, we've got 2 heavyweights. It could easily go the other way. And that's why if you got just a good plus money price on Sherman, be worth a go. But this is a card where confidence plays, like very confident plays, are few and far between. It's just we're looking at where is there possible value. I do see Chase Sherman as an underdog, as a dog with a chance. I do see some value on him. It's just my confidence level isn't through the roof. We're betting Chase Sherman. against a bona fide veteran of the sport in Andrei Arlovski. I just think circumstance and timing is everything, and Chase Sherman's getting him at the right time.
Well, you answered the question I was going to ask you, and that is, if this goes to decision, how do we not like Chase Sherman? He's going to have the output. And to see this at plus 365, 375 to Arlovski's 165, 175, to me, that seems a little bit nuts. Like, how does Arlovski win decisions? With bad judging is the main way. That's how he beat Bozer. Bozer had way more output, kind of stared at him, but at the end of the day, landed way more shots.
Way more.
Yeah, so like, how does Chase Sherman not outland him? And to me, that is the way to play this fight. I hate the small cage with heavyweights and banking on an over, but 365 is way too high for Sherman by decision. And I do believe by fight time that will be much less. This is something that people will take advantage of. And I do agree with you. We might see Arlovski close as a dog. And I got really no issue with that because Sherman can take a punch. He is improving rapidly. Like you said, he took some time off. He got better. Yeah, he came back and fought Cans. But if you watch the film, he did what you're supposed to do against Cans. And that is beat the crap out of them, control the octagon, and not get hit that much. He did that. He did just fine doing that. Now, we mentioned the small cage. He wants to, put the volume in and move around on the outside a bit. I don't think he's going to have trouble doing that with Arlovski because Arlovski doesn't pressure. He doesn't pressure. He kind of just backs himself up. So, end of the day, maybe I just convinced myself that Sherman's worth a play, but especially by decision, that's definitely worth a little bit of chump change at the minimum at the plus 365, 375 line. It, in reality, should probably be no higher than plus 250. So, let's move on. Alhassan, Malkoun. Hey, what do you know? Another fight I hate from a betting perspective. Yeah, the better fighter, Alhassan, sure. Minus 300 for a guy that just got dug out of a grave to come back for a UFC fight. I don't know how I feel about that, man. Like, his lights were shut off so bad that you almost worry for the guy after seeing him get dropped like that. Some guys never recover from that. And Malkoun, yeah, he's got some power behind it. I will say, if he catches this guy clean and his chin is officially cracked from his last fight, that might not go so well. I'm not comfortable at all with the line, but I think it's a pretty obvious pick to win is Alhassan. But again, I'm a value player. I don't just bet who I think will win. And again, that makes this very difficult for me to assess and handicap properly. So I got to lean on you again here for the fourth straight fight. Is there any value to be had on this one, or just the odds makers are just doing a great job, it feels like, so far on this card?
Yeah, I mean, as far as the 3-1 favorite goes, you don't really want to be betting Alhassan at that price because he's already let us down a number of times now. So his first loss in the UFC against Omari Akhmedov, he was a minus 265 favorite. That's pretty big. His second loss in the UFC against Munir Lazez, he's a minus 350 favorite. And his last loss, obviously, against Chaos Williams, he comes in as a minus 210 favorite. So I have the term shit in the apple pie. As one of these guys, he's a favorite. He's a big favorite. Everybody likes him. The public's on his side. He goes out there and he generally gasses out after one round. I mean, he's got one round in him. He's 35 years old. He's known as Judo Thunder because he has his Judo black belt, but he routinely gives up takedowns once he gets tired after the first round. If a guy doesn't have cardio, if a guy doesn't have that ability to go into those deeper waters, then he's going to lose as the favorite, and that's what we see happen. The Omari Akhmedov fight, once he gets tired, he just starts giving up takedowns. He's completely gassed out. It's no good. But there's no denying that when he is winning fights, he just sparks these guys in the first round. 2 wins over Sabah Hamasi, who we're going to see in Bellator tomorrow night against Paul Daly. Those are impressive. And by the way, he did not look good in the first one at all, but he gets the knockout. The second one, he looked a lot better, gets the knockout. Knocks out Nico Price in 43 seconds. That is very impressive. That puts him on the map. And then we've seen him struggle largely since then. But Dave, I'll tell you, man, when I see this guy hit the scales at 170 pounds, I think, my God, he's got a lot of muscle to get in this frame. Like, it would be a very tough weight cut as a 35-year-old. Then when you see go in there, I mean, he's kind of hesitant. Like, he doesn't want to let his hands go because he's worried about getting tired. And then after the first round, he does get tired. One has to wonder, maybe, just maybe, it's because of these bad weight cuts. And so now he's taking this fight at 185 pounds. And even though I think he's a little undersized for 185, UFC's done a pretty good job in giving him Jacob Malkoun. And to be honest, I feel lied to. I absolutely feel lied to because Jacob Malkoun is known as Robert Whittaker's coach, right? That's his claim to fame. That was why he got into the UFC. He fought UFC 254, and he was, oh, well, he's Robert Whittaker's BJJ coach. Fair enough. Okay, so first of all, he's 25 years old. So would you trust a 25-year-old to be your jiu-jitsu coach? Like, I want some grizzly, 40-year-old man. I want some guy who's he's competed for 15 years. He's competed for 20 years. He's been around. He's done that. He's had his black belt for a long time. No. This kid, 25 years old, still young, still feels like he has something to learn. But okay, fair enough. He's just a jiu-jitsu coach. No problem. He's never actually submitted an opponent in professional MMA. And on top of that, he took a pro boxing match. So, is he a jiu-jitsu guy? I couldn't tell you. But maybe he's a little bit better of a striker than we think he is. No. That fight with Phil Hawes, he gets knocked out 18 seconds. He looked awful. And, you talked about, can Razak Al-Hassan come back from a nasty knockout? Malkoun's in the same boat, man. I mean, he just suffered a nasty knockout. It's the first loss of his career. It's a devastating loss. And beyond that, he didn't have anything to show. So in this, when I look at Al-Hassan, 3-1 favorite, I'm not interested. But how is Al-Hassan going to win this fight? Well, Al-Hassan's won all of his fights by the same way, by knockout. And Malkoun has maybe shown a bit of a suspect chin. He maybe shown that he's not quite at this level. And I think he's in for another rough spot. So if you want to improve a 3-1 price tag on Al-Hassan, you would take Al-Hassan by knockout at -130. I briefly flirted with the idea of the under 1.5 rounds, which is also 130, being that either Al-Hassan knocks him out in the first round, or if he doesn't and he gets tired, Malkoun, for whatever reason, ends up in top control. Maybe Malkoun puts him away. But I've been burned like that in the past, where it's like Al-Hassan does knock him out, but he happens to knock him out late in the second or something stupid like that. This would scream first-round knockout Al-Hassan if you were going to bet any side of it. But, fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. Fool me 3 times, I don't even know what you call that. If I bet this guy's a 3-1 favorite and he loses, how much shame is coming Cody Saftik's way, really? So not overly interested in betting this guy on a straight-up money line side of things. If I wanted to bet it, if I had to bet it, I have to improve that, and I have to just roll the dice on the Al-Hassan by knockout.
Well, I mean, that's the way you got to look at it, but it's an easy pass, right? Super easy pass. Just like I'm going to pass the next few fights because they're super boring and irrelevant from a betting perspective, running out a little bit of time. So I will say this to transition into this fight. Fool me 3 times, I believe George W. once said, we won't get fooled again. And now here we have Dakota Harry Bush taking on Austin Hubbard. This is an interesting fight. If you ask me, I went through the film and I kind of like Dakota Bush in this spot. Hubbard, he's okay. I could see him grinding out a decision, but I can't really see him, getting a big highlight knockout. This guy he's got a fair amount of UFC experience now, and it seems to be mainly against good grapplers, not exactly his specialty. Madsen took him down a bunch of times, even Max Roshkov here, not a good fighter, quit on himself, but managed to get a few takedowns. Selecki on the score, or on the stat line here, says he went 0 for 2, but he took his back in 1 minute flat and was wearing him like a backpack, finished him in round 1. That's an even more of a good takedown, I would say, than actually getting the takedown. And Dakota Bush, he likes to wrestle. I actually think his hands are just as good, but I do think he's going to be able to take this to the mat a few times. And when I look at the odds here, and I see that Hubbard is pretty good at getting back up to his feet when he does get taken down, we'll give him credit there. He doesn't have a lot of power in his hands. It leads me to believe that this one could easily go the distance. And here again, we're seeing the UFC debut for Dakota Harry Bush, captain of the all-name team, upwards of plus 500 by decision. Look, I think this probably does go to decision, and I think it's probably a razor-close fight. You could say Hubbard maybe should win it, but I don't think Hubbard should be laying minus 190 kind of chalk. And if we're talking by decision prop, I don't really understand how Hubbard's plus 120 and Bush is plus 500. I think it'll be much closer than that. So I do see some value on this kid making his UFC debut. Not exactly the greatest spot, but Hubbard, not a great prospect, I don't think. I don't think he's going to spend a lot of time in the UFC. He's going to have to win this one, that's for sure. If he doesn't win this, I might be right. He might be getting his walking papers. How do you see this fight going? Do you see any value on Austin Hubbard?
Yeah, I don't mind Austin Hubbard, actually. To be honest with you, the UFC hasn't really exactly given him an easy run. So you talk about his takedown defense. That is key here. So Davi Ramos takes him down 3 times. Davi Ramos is a former ADCC world champion, BJJ for days. Getting taken down by him, really not that big of an issue. And by the way, he didn't get submitted in that fight, was impressive. Marco Madsen won a silver medal at the Olympics. He's also medaled 4 times at the Worlds, including 3 silvers and a bronze. His wrestling is probably best in the division. He gives up 8 takedowns to Marco Madsen, but he makes him work every single time. See, when Hubbard gets taken down, he works his way back up. And him being at Elevation Fight Team in Colorado, his cardio just seems infinite. So what he does is he breaks these guys down. Now, Mark Madsen, 36 years old, but when he went to the UFC Performance Institute, the personal trainers, the doctors, all these guys, they ran all these tests on him, and they all came to a pretty similar conclusion. They're like, this is a freak athlete, levels that do not walk in these doors very often. And yet when you look third round of that fight, Hubbard is taking it to him because he's tired. Now, Max Roshkoff quit, yes, but Max Roshkoff is a D1 All-American out of the University of North Carolina. Joe Selecki is a high-level BJJ black belt, a guy who wrestled out of New Jersey, has very good wrestling. And he was initially supposed to take on this Nathan Levy, who's an absolute wrestler and grappler. All Hubbard does is take on these wrestler-grappler guys, and he gets taken down, and he works his way back up. The Selecki fight's a little bit different. He doesn't get taken down per se by the takedowns, but yes, he gives up a standing back take. As soon as he gives up his back, Selecki slinks in the rear naked choke, and that's unfortunately all she wrote for Austin Hubbard. But I think he'd be able to go back to and just go back to his meat and potatoes, which is keep this fight standing as long as you can. If you get taken down, make the guy work. Always continuously make the opponent work. Now, Nate Levy was actually a higher level wrestler and grappler than Dakota Bush. So taking on this short notice replace is actually going to be easier for him in that the opponent should be a little bit easier. But also, because he's the kind of guy that his best weapon is his cardio and working you later rounds, it's going to be advantageous to take on an opponent taking the fight on short notice, because with Dakota Bush, does he have 15 minutes of cardio? Is he going to be able to continuously grind? Now, you talk about his wrestling, and, it looks like Dakota Bush can wrestle a little bit. When you look back at his fight with Jaleel Willis, and Jaleel Willis is an okay wrestler, he has no success with the wrestling whatsoever. It's like once he meets his match, the wrestling just goes out the window. Can he strike a little bit? Yes. But I think Hubbard's going to routinely just back him down and hurt this guy. Now, when Hubbard came to the UFC, it's like this guy is not going to last long at all. But he is one of the chief sparring partners for both Justin Gaethje and at Elevation Fight Team. All the guy does is get in world-class rounds in the gym day in and day out. That's also why his cardio is so good. That's also why he's making these improvements. But he's never lost back-to-back fights in the UFC. He lost to Davi Ramos. He beat Kyle Prepelic. He lost to Marco Madsen. He beat Max Roshkoff. He lost to Joe Selecki. I think he's in line for a win. And when you look at his wins, Kyle Prepelic no longer with the company, Max Roshkoff no longer with the company, and Dakota Bush might not last very long in this company. Losses is key. Davi Ramos, Marco Madsen, Joe Selecki, are you kidding me? Those are high-level opponents. Whereas Dakota Bush is making his UFC debut, bright lights, octagon jitters, short notice, taking on a guy who's a 5-time UFC veteran and has fought in some good guys. It's not the easiest spot in the world. And so for that reason, I would go Austin Hubbard. I can see chasing some value and, this and that, and maybe Hubbard's not exactly, you want to bet the guy as a favorite. I get that minus 185 is a lot, but I don't want to just take that screaming blind shot on Dakota Bush. I think this is going to be a rough one for him, and I can see Hubbard getting it done. Now, I don't want to sound like a broken record hitting these overs and these fight goes the distance, but, again, Austin Hubbard, what are his intangibles? What's his finishing skill? Does he submit? No. Does he knock guys out? No, technically the guy knocked himself out when he quit on the stool, and that's his only finish inside the UFC. We've seen as well. It's like he's a guy that overcomes adversity. That Achilles Mota fight, it's a 5th round finish. So in a 3-round fight, again, this is another decision. But he's losing the majority of that fight against Achilles Mota before coming back and finishing him late. And that's prior to the UFC. But again, it speaks to his character, his perseverance. He usually does give up these early rounds, and then he goes later. So Dave, you and I would do the show all the time, and one thing that we always like talking about is a live betting spot. This one actually could be interesting. Dakota Bush might come out and give a good account of himself in that first round, maybe even wins the first round. And if I can get Austin Hubbard as a plus money underdog for rounds 2 or 3, that's generally where he shines. He's a slow starter. He usually takes a little bit to get going, and when he does, cardio takes over. That's how I would see him getting the job done. But betting it pre-fight at minus 185 is a little bit iffy. It's a little bit of a tall task, I'll admit.
I like that angle. I like it a lot. Hubbard started very slow against Max, who we know quit on himself. He's definitely not UFC caliber. But again, he was dropping round 1 by my estimation in that one. Very well could here too. And yeah, plus money on Hubbard. Now we're talking, especially if your book has live props. to get Hubbard by decision when he's down one round, that'll be through the roof. So great angle. I like that. This is actually my favorite fight on the card coming up here, and I don't think anyone in the world would even like this fight. But I like Zara Farron against Jose Nunez here, and I like it for a variety of reasons. One, she has massive size advantage here. She's 6 inches taller, 5 more inches of reach. She's coming down from featherweight to bantamweight where it looks like she belongs. And I look at Nunez, 5'2". She easily could be fighting at flyweight. She's not very big. But the thing that bothers me the most about Nunez is she pulls guard, and she's horrible off her back. In so much of the footage, I've seen her going for a guillotine, standing guillotine, dropping to her back, and never getting up. I mean, what are you even thinking? Beyond that, when they're standing, she throws loopy hooks, and Zara hides behind a straight jab. I mean, it's ugly fighting. I don't think Zara's good, but you're going to give me the 5-inch reach advantage, 6-inch height advantage. She fights lanky, so she's going to fight long. It probably works out to like 8 or 9 inches she can hide behind this jab with, and these loopy hooks should have trouble getting home. So, yeah, I think she should be the favorite in this one. And that's really all I can say. There's really no data for Nunez because this is her UFC debut, and I do like comparing numbers and, looking over the strength of schedule and seeing how they were accumulated and against who. So this isn't a great opportunity because there is no data, but she does not look like UFC caliber. She looks small for bantamweight and technically far from sound. I can't stand the looping hooks against a taller, lankier fighter. So yeah, I think Zara can get this to the ground if she wants it there. I think Nunez might put herself there, and I think she's going to be hard to shake from the top if she gets there. And if it's on the feet again, if she wants to throw a little bit of volume with her long jab, I think she'll get ahead in the striking as well. So unless she gets caught by one of these looping hooks, I think she's got this in the bag. I quite like this at just over plus 100. I like the decision. What's it at, like plus 190 last I looked? Like that. Actually bet both of those. So why don't you take us through this one? Do you like Nunez?
No, actually, I'm going to agree with you with Zara Farron. I can't say I got a whole lot of confidence in it because you got Zara Farron. She's 34 years old. She's 0-2 in the UFC. This is her first fight at 135. Both of her fights prior, she was absolutely blown in the water in the first round, completely non-competitive. But it's looking at who she lost to. Felicia Spencer, okay. The number 2 girl in the division, all right. What else you got for me? Megan Anderson, okay. She's 6 feet tall. She's the only legitimate 145-pounder in the division. Cut now, I get it. But it's like she took on the number 2 and 3 girls in the division. Okay, interesting. I'm going to give her a pass on both. When you look at regional scene, it's like, yeah, there's something that you can take away from there. She fought Isabel Badurek, who's a UFC veteran herself, one-time UFC veteran. And, I mean, she just walks right through her, knocks her out in the first round, minute 55 in. You see that when she's moving forward, she's letting her hands go. There is something there. She also does have a win over Kerry Hughes. And the fight with Sinead Kavanagh. So Kavanagh, that's John Kavanagh's sister, right? She trains at SPG Ireland. She spent time with McGregor and the whole cast down there. She was a huge signing for Bellator, and she was a big star in Bama. She loses a split decision to Kavanagh. Robbed. I mean, I thought she won the fight for sure, but they have more of an investment in Kavanagh, so she gets a split decision. Whatever, that's fine. It looked that you can take away there. So fighting at 145, it didn't look like she was totally out of place, but let's be real. She's not a natural featherweight. Coming down to 135, this is perfect. This is a better weight class for her. If she's going to give a good account of herself, it's going to be here at 135 pounds. And then with Nunez, it's like, listen, I mean, you banked on the main point here. She's 5'2". She should be fighting probably at 115 pounds. But if we're being generous, we could tell her that, she could be fighting at 125. But I mean, again, she just looks a little bit undersized. She's a girl that has 6 knockouts, 1 decision. She's never submitted an opponent. She comes out of the Strikers Academy. She very much wants to strike. She's a little bit brute. She's a little bit on a straight line. She's a little bit, non-linear, likes to throw a lot of these hooks. And I think Farron's just going to be the bigger, stronger fighter. You factor in the 6 inches reach, that's huge. Or the 6 inches of height, that's huge. The 5 inches of reach, it's all good. Awful in the UFC because of the ground game. But if we take ground game right off of it, and we got striker versus striker, I would say Farron has a slight edge. She also has 2 fights in the UFC. So regardless that they were bad experiences, they were experiences. She made the walk. She warmed up in the back. She heard her name get called. She went down. She heard the decision get read. She made the travel. She went back to the hotel. That's all stuff that you gain as a fighter. Whereas you look at Nunez, I thought this was crazy, right? Nunez has been fighting professionally since 2013, right? She's an 8-year pro. In the 8 years she's been fighting, she has 8 fights. Like, come on, man. It's just not enough. It's not enough experience. She hasn't shown enough. And then beyond that, when you look at her record, it's a lot of these backing the opponents down, tiring them, letting the hands go a little bit, catching them, hurting them. I think Farron should be able to give a great account of herself. I'm not looking to bank heavily on Farron, but she's the underdog. And so again, on cards, when you're looking at who are these underdogs with chances, I would say Farron's one of them. Unfortunately, the matchmakers really got they've got an eye for it now, is that they're not giving you these great underdogs. Just as a random example, I like Jakar Close plus 100. We were talking about Chase Sherman plus 100. Where's the meat for us, right? I like Alex Munoz plus 130. There's not a ton there. I know people like Gerald Meerschaert plus 110. Not a ton there. People like Espino plus 115. Not a ton there. Zara Farron plus 105, it's the same thing, like who are our big underdogs? Well, I don't like any of these big underdogs, but there's 4 or 5 solid underdogs that are near that even money range, Farron being one of them. So I agree with your assessment that Farron should be able to get the job done, plus money, she's the value side of this. I would think that this thing is going to go 15 minutes just because we're going to have a striking battle between 2 girls that maybe don't have the most power. I know that Nunez shows 6 finishes in 7 fights, but again, you got to go look at level of competition. I think Farron's going to be the toughest girl she's fought, especially if it's just going to be a striking battle. But yeah, again, as far as a confidence level, I would feel better betting Ben Askren than I would getting into this middling, low-level women's 135-pound division.
Really? Okay. I quite like Sarah. I made the line minus 140, and I thought even that might be a little bit low. Yeah, Nunes does have knockouts, but if you watch those fights, it's like, who does she knock out? These girls were all beating her pretty much. She spent a lot of time on her back and then sometime gets through with these big hooks. I just don't see it here. This is the UFC. It's a little different.
That's fair. I look back at last weekend, the Yergas-Danho fight. A lot of people were telling me, like, dude, hasn't fought in 4.5 years, and he didn't look good, and this and that. But it's like, when you have such a limited pint-sized portion that you can analyze, they'll come back and they'll look completely different. And you see that a lot with these Brazilian fighters. This is a girl that only fights once a year. So what we're taking away from her is a lot of old information, and that we just don't fully know how to gauge what version is going to show up. Also, if for whatever reason Nunez pops hot, you don't get your money back. It's a no contest. But as a bettor, we're losing. So you don't know if she's going to show up in incredible shape and not quite get over the hump of USADA. Like there's a lot of intangibles. And so would I bet money on Farron? Yes. And am I going to bet money on Farron? Correct. But I don't like investing a ton or even a moderate size amount in something that has that many questions, the what ifs. So even if I had lined it at minus 140 and this plus 105, it's not reason for me to absolutely hammer it just because I see that discrepancy. It's like, okay, I will bet the underdog. I will have some degenerate small little parlays. I will show some props. But as far as like a key piece for the weekend, I don't know that I would go to that well.
Okay. And last up here, Tony Gravely, Anthony Burchek. This is pretty much my most confident pick. I mean, it should be. Gravely's over minus 300 now. But to me, this is pretty easy work he's going to put in here. If we start with Burchek, this guy gets taken down a little too often for my liking. You'll see that he has a 60% takedown defense, but we have to question who he's getting taken down by here. No one that is very good, okay? He's faced takedowns. Let me bring this up here. He faced 12 takedown attempts against Delano Lopez. Who the hell is that, you might ask? Exactly. Not UFC caliber. 2 fights in the UFC. See you later. The guy stinks. He went 2 of 12 on Burchek and gained 5 minutes and 10 seconds of control time on his 2 takedowns. Not a great wrestler at all. He's only landed 2 takedowns in his UFC career. They were both against Burchek out of the 4 attempts he's had. So the only guy he was able to take down, he's not very good at it, but he managed 5 minutes of control time off those 2 takedowns. And if we go back this truck up a little bit here, Gustavo Lopez is his next opponent, takes him down 2 out of 3 times in the first round, gives up just over a minute of control time and gets choked out all within 2 minutes and 43 seconds of the fight. That is not a good look. And Gustavo Lopez, not a great wrestler. Tony Gravely is a good wrestler. This guy's landing 51% of his takedowns. And I got to say, I think, Burchak has a 73% takedown defense. I was reading his defense on the striking by accident. But that 73, you got to take with a major grain of salt because almost everything that he has stuffed has come from a bad wrestler who went 2 of 12. If Grappling has 12 takedown attempts, he's probably going to land 8 of them in this fight. The guy averages 5.6 per 15 minutes landed. He's fought the better strength of schedule by a mile. In fact, I would say Burchak's probably the worst guy he's fought, maybe Ray Rodriguez, but they're close. To me, it's Gravely all day. Not only is he going to smoke him in the wrestling department and gain control time, he also lands 55% of his significant strikes. You look at Burchak only landing 36%. So I think he's going to hit him a couple times, take him down, hold him down, and just do it on repeat. I have no issue at all if you can get this at minus 300. I think it should be more like minus 400. He's live for a finish. Definitely got it on the scorecards. To me, this is just a no-brainer, a decent investment. If you're into parlays, this could be a perfect spot to put with your over 2.5 in the Askren fight. Yeah, I like Tony Gravely. I think he's got a decent future ahead of him. Who do you like in this fight?
Yeah, so I'm actually a big Anthony Burchak fan, but I can't let fandom get in the way of a good pick, and I think Tony Gravely's the guy. I'm going to agree with you 100% there. Anthony Burchak is he's a guy that wrestled collegiately. He came out of Arizona. He wrestled with the likes of Ryan Bader and CB Dalloway, Caden Velasquez, John Morales. They churned out a lot of great guys out of Arizona, good, very solid wrestlers. And Burchak was touted as one of them. When he made his run the first time around the UFC, it was like, hey, man, this guy can wrestle. This guy's legit. He's 10-1. He's used his wrestling extremely effectively. He was actually the Maximum Fighting Championship 135-pound king, which is MFC out in Alberta, right? So he had fought in Canada a bunch of times. I was extremely familiar with him. Makes his UFC debut against Ian Entwistle. He's a minus 280 favorite. I'm rubbing my hands together. And Ian Entwistle just pulled guard on a heel hook and submitted him a minute in. And literally, that was sour taste in my mouth from Burchak, who I really liked up to this point. And it's been downhill almost ever since. The Thomas Almeida fight, he gets knocked out easy. Delano Lopez fight, you've mentioned 100%. Surrendering those takedowns against Delano Lopez, the runner-up, dude lost in Brazil against Reginaldo Vieira. How embarrassing is that? This guy's taking you down, man. I got a problem. He does win that split decision, but beyond that, how crazy is this? Dude wins a split decision over Delano Lopez, and the UFC cut him. They cut him off a win. He signed with Ryzen off a win in the UFC. That doesn't happen to anybody. It's unheralded. Nobody loses and gets cut, or nobody wins and gets cut. Yeah, brutal. Anthony Pettis technically, but last fight of his contract, and he makes a lot of money. This guy, it was just they were like, yeah, I think we're going to pass. So he goes to Japan. He fought in Japan 3 times. He lost all 3 times. Losing to Kawajiri, no problem. Losing to Takafumi Otsuka, that's a problem. Mind you, if it was North American rules, if it was unified rules, he probably would have won the first 2 rounds. In Japan, it's all about how you finish. It's all about the fight as a whole, and he lost. You look at this Jihu Moon fight, he's 10-10. 10 wins, 10 losses. Shouldn't be in this spot. Again, loses. It's his best days are certainly behind him. The fact that the UFC re-signed him, I thought was amazing. And they gave him a very winnable fight in Gustavo Lopez. But when you saw Gustavo Lopez, a Combate Americas veteran, a natural boxer, he took him down twice like nothing, and then took his back and submitted him. Prior to that, he also hurt him standing. It's Burchak's 34. He's been through a lot, I believe. His chin's not very good. His wrestling defense is not very good. His cardio is not very good. And this is all massive problems to have against Tony Gravely, who he chain wrestles, man. He just wrestles. The fact that he took down Brett Johns 5 times, you look at all those scrambles in that fight, it's a crazy fight. But 5 takedowns over Brett Johns is extremely impressive. 7 takedowns over Geraldo de Freitas. 10 minutes of top control time. What more could you want? This one really is writing on the wall, is that he goes out there and he gets Burchak down. Even if Burchak stuffed the first one, Tony Gravely's just going to chain wrestle him down. If Burchak manages to get back up, Gravely's just going to shoot more takedowns and eventually get him back down. Going into the 3rd round, Gravely did tire against Brett Johns. Gravely did tire against Geraldo de Freitas. But Burchak's got even worse cardio than that. So even if Gravely does get tired, I don't think Burchak capitalizes. Now, one thing I will mention is Burchak is beat belt. He's been spending a lot of time working on his grappling. With Gravely, is there that chance that maybe he gets caught in a submission? Listen, it's MMA. Anything can happen. A punch can knock you out. A bad scramble can lead to a back take and you get submitted. Certainly it's possible. But I think Gravely, 29 years old, training out of American Top Team, he's only getting better and better. It's only improving. It's only getting better for him. Now, do I like a 3-1 price tag? No, but it's lined appropriately because he's a 3-1 favorite. He legitimately has the better skill set, the better path to victory, and the bigger chance to win. So we like that. Now, you know me, and I like my decision props. When I look at Tony Gravely to win a decision, it's plus 246. And again, he loves this wrestling heavy attack where he just grinds you down, but he's not really finishing a whole lot of opponents. Stand up, he'll throw his punches as long as the distance, take you down. On the ground, again, we just saw Gustavo Lopez submit Burchak. And interesting enough, Burchak took a submission, like a grappling match, like 3 months after that and got caught in a first round guillotine choke. So like, is he actually a black belt? I don't know. He hasn't really been showing black belt level skills on the mat. So Gravely could catch him in a submission. Gravely could TKO him. But a part of me thinks that Gravely will just use the wrestling and just rinse and repeat, take this guy down over and over. And so for a plus 246 decision tag, I'm looking at Gravely straight up. Gravely's going to be parlay material, but also I'm looking at that Gravely decision prop. And if anybody likes to play fantasy MMA, specifically DraftKings, they score really well for takedowns and top control. And I think Gravely's going to have a lot of that in both these spots. So if you're rostering up a fantasy MMA team on something like DraftKings or Fan, Gravely's an excellent choice as well.
I love it. Great breakdown there. That would be great for DraftKings. He's a must-have in your lineup. Cody, what's your favorite play of the weekend? What do you got?
Yeah, so, I mean, again, this is a card that has a lot of these underdogs that there's just not quite enough meat on the bone on them. So it's like, do you side with one underdog as your play of the week? Do you side with, somebody with a little bit more meat on the bone? I'm not sure. I'm going to probably tie a parlay together. One spot I don't mind is Tracy Cortez by decision. Tracy Cortez, obviously, a very wrestling-heavy type fighter. She's also coming down from 135 pounds to 125, which is going to be the natural weight class for her. And with Justine Kish, I mean, she's routinely struggled with fighting off of her back. So I think there's a good path of victory that Cortez just is able to ground her, take her down, and then take her over the course of 15 minutes. Cortez wins by decision. Let me just see because the price might have moved a little bit. It is currently sitting at Cortez. Where's Cortez decision?
It's plus 125 last I seen.
Right. Yeah, it was plus money last night when I was looking at it. And so that was a play I didn't mind. You and I talked about, the Askren over 2.5. I mean, that's a spot that I like as well in that fight. And I'm going with a lot of these decisions. But to give you like a really quick rapid fire roundup, because I know we haven't talked about all the fights, but I'm going to go Whitaker by decision. That's plus money. Jakar close by decision. That's plus money. Sherman is already plus money, but again, by decision, it'd be a lot more. Al Hassan, that one's going to be a knockout, and he's already a big favorite. Maybe you pass on there. This Alex Munoz, he's at Team Alpha Male. He's more of a decision guy. Luis Pena has given up takedowns in every single one of his UFC fights, except for his last one against Kama Worthy, which he ended up getting submitted by a guillotine choke. It's bad takedown defense against the kid out of Alpha Male who's making a sophomore effort. That's a good spot for a plus 130 underdog. Tracy Cortez, again, she's a wrestler. She's big on the money line. You're going to want to hit that by decision. Keisha's tough to put away. Romanov versus Spino is going to be absolutely nuts, and I'm not sure that you want to bet money on that one. Lupita Godinez, I think that she's going to piece up Jessica Panay. If you're one of these guys that likes to chase like those, again, it's a penny stock type play, but a third round finish for Lupita Gonzalez or Godinez is like 18-1. And with Panay, 4-year-long layoff, doesn't wear damage particularly well. Bartosz Fabinski by decisions plus money. Austin Hubbard decisions plus money. Azar Farron decisions plus money. Tony Gravely. So there's a lot of great spots. I'm not sure that I would be able to say what my favorite one is, but I got a feeling that Cortez at plus 125 gets this fight to the ground and is able to make it happen.
That's awesome. What's your favorite play? Go give a pick for every single fight. All right, boil it down to those, boys.
Well, I know
I will say
five. Yeah, we've only talked about like a couple of fights.
Yeah, that's true. We skipped quite a few. I didn't know you liked a lot of the ones we skipped.
That's the benefit here.
Yeah. Give me the Askren fight over 2.5 rounds at minus 250. I know that's not cool giving out a minus 250, but I think that honestly should be over minus 500. I can't wrap my head around either guy getting the knockout that early. I don't mind sprinkling Jake Paul by decision plus 700. I think that's reasonable. But at the end of the day, Gravely minus 300 right now on Bet365. That looks to be the best line available. That's parlay material in my opinion. So yeah, there's money to be had this weekend. I hope you enjoyed the show. We'll see you next week. We got another UFC event coming up. Thank you for joining me, Cody. We'll catch you guys next time.